All right. What is going on, Panthers Nation? Carolina Dad here, your host of the Two Growls One Roar podcast. I am very excited about today's guest. You may recognize him primarily from Panthers football on the radio. Also, he does a lot of work. I'm excited to have Anish Shroff on the show. How's it going, man?
It's been good, man. It's been good. It's the calm before the storm, a little time off to get some rest, recalibrate, and then training camp is right around the corner.
It's quickly approaching. I've already looked at tickets and dates. So we live in Wilmington, North Carolina. So we're trying to work out the logistics. And I do like to tell people that follow the show, they know this, that I have in-laws that were in Spartanburg. So I had a very nice situation there. But hey, guess what? Spartanburg's only like an hour from Charlotte. So we'll be able to make the drive, still get to see family. So it'll be a good time. But yeah, definitely busy time for you. Now, one of the things I wanted to do, kind of kicking off the show, is talk a little bit about non-Panthers stuff because
Sure.
you do a lot. And so one of the things I wanted to just see is like, hey, what else is going on for you today? I know you've been working on lacrosse. I know you do college football, maybe a little bit of Major League Baseball. Just kind of hearing how things are going for you outside of the Panthers world.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a full slate. I think my calendar normally starts in the fall. Yeah, we have our Panthers preseason, obviously, but once we get into September, it's college football and then Panthers every
Mhm.
week. That takes you through bowl season, and then at some point we throw college basketball in there. I've covered the ACC. I've been covering the ACC for a while now. So the one good thing about that is the travel is pretty reasonable. You know, you're going to NC State and UNC and Wake and Duke, Clemson, Virginia Tech. Those aren't far drives. Occasionally, you get the BC, Syracuse, Pitt game, Louisville, whatever. But
Yeah.
it's nice to be in the ACC footprint. So I'll do college basketball, and that gets me through the winter. And then usually March, I kickstart with lacrosse. I'm our lead play-by-play voice at ESPN for lacrosse. Have been since 2017. It's a sport that it's kind of been a labor of love for me, a passion project in a lot of ways. I got into it when I was in college and have sort of stayed with it and become a fan. So we'll do our college lacrosse season, which takes us through Memorial Day. In the interim, I'll sprinkle in a little MLB on the radio, a little college baseball. I usually do a regional, sometimes a super regional in there. And now lacrosse has its pro league, which is the PLL, the Premier Lacrosse League. So
Mhm.
1 week they're usually in Charlotte. So I'll do that weekend and then usually one or two other weekends. But we get to about, the beginning or the middle of June, and then I kind of draw the line in the sand a little bit, take some time off, spend some more quality time with the wife, the kid, and the family, and recharge and get rested, and then we start the cycle anew.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, pretty quickly here.
Man, and I thought I had it bad only talking Panthers and going through that cycle. Man, you stay busy. I appreciate your work, man. I know you put in a ton of time and effort into all those things. I'm a big ACC guy, so I love whenever you're on the radio or on the play-by-play, whatever it is, getting to hear you. One of the things though, so with the and this is again just something I thought about with the ACC expanding, you
Yeah.
know, does that impact you, or do you know what that's going to mean just yet, or just waiting to see?
I'm sure it will. Obviously, a trip to Clemson or NC State is not the same as a trip to Stanford or
Yeah.
Cal or SMU. So it changes travel, it changes the geographical footprint of the conference, certainly. Certainly for college football, our crew does the Friday night game every week. So we don't have our schedule. But again, just looking at it, I think the first week it's TCU at Stanford. So we might be on the West Coast. I don't think there's NFL that weekend. That's that first weekend before Labor Day. So I think it may work out. But yeah, it changes travel. Certainly, it adds more teams to the league. But that's the arms race of college football right now. The Pac-12 went away. Everybody's looking for a landing spot. The teams that didn't go to the Big Ten end up in the ACC. Certain teams went to the Big 12. So I think everybody is trying to find one of those coveted spots in what is now the Power Four. And I think there's another wave of realignment coming. I don't know if it's going to look like AFC, NFC, and
Hmm.
maybe we can get back to regionalizing college football, which I do think is, at the very core of the sport, the regional rivalries, and we're losing some of that. I hope
Yep.
we can get back to that in some way, shape, or form, but it almost seems inevitable now that at some point the FBS, the major schools from the FBS, are going to break off from the rest of college athletics and
Hmm.
essentially do their own. They're going to stage their own league, and they're probably going to have a pay structure. I mean, the whole thing with amateurism,
Hmm.
we're selling fool's gold at this point.
Yeah. It's wild. It's wild to see everything unfold, and I'm gonna have to see if we can bring you back, talk a little college football way down the road.
Yep.
So one of the things that, as we talk about your schedule and getting into the fall and how busy you are, I was curious, what is it like balancing the college football season and Panthers? Getting prepared for those games or everything that's working on your schedule. What that's like?
Yeah, the good thing is, having done this as long as I've been doing it, you have a really strong idea of what it is you need to do every week to be prepared. And from there, it's about staying disciplined and just not getting behind, not procrastinating, getting your work done on time. I have duties, again, beyond just calling the game. So we'll do a college football game Friday, Saturday. I will travel to either wherever the Panthers are or back home to Charlotte. I'm working on the plane. There's really no off day in the fall. And so you accept
Hmm.
that, right? Now, you might get a team multiple times. Maybe that cuts down your prep for a college football week. And then you call the game Sunday. And then usually on the flight back home, or when I get back home Sunday from the Panthers, I start working on the next week. And then Monday, we do our coaches show. Last week, we were in the lab on Monday as well with the Panthers working on cardiac. The look back at the
Yep.
2003 team that went to the Super Bowl, and that was a lot of man hours and time,
I'm sure.
um, and a lot went into that. So you really just kind of have to compartmentalize each day. And again, I think sometimes when you're in the creative space, you're not the most organized person, but I always look at it this way: when you are organized and you're clean, that allows you to be creative too. And
Yep.
so it's just kind of coming up with a routine. Okay, this is what Monday looks like. These are the things I need to get done. And then little things too. You'd be surprised, just getting enough sleep, getting enough
I'm
rest.
sure.
Things that when I was younger, yeah, I could stay up and work till 2, 3 in the morning. There was no kid in the picture, right? It didn't matter when you woke up,
Hmm.
it didn't matter. But now, the kid's up at 6 a.m. like clockwork every day. So
Yep.
as you know, it's little things like that where you just prioritize getting your sleep, prioritize getting your rest, making sure you're doing all the stuff from your prep to your film study. And especially on the road, I think, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night on the road, I make sure, hey, I'm getting a good 8 hours of sleep because I know it's a heavy load during the work week. I want to be rested when I'm showing up to call these games.
Yep. It's a lot of work, man. Do you ever like balancing between the two? I feel like the Panthers, as far as like understanding the players and just everything that's happening, you're, kind of in line with that. Is it harder with college? Like if you're bouncing around to, call in
Oh
these
yeah,
two
yeah,
teams?
yeah. I mean, you think of it this way, right? With the Panthers, it's home team radio, so
Yep.
one of the two teams you have every single week.
Hmm.
And again, now going into year three, and I lived in Charlotte for a decade plus before I took the Panthers job, so yeah, there was already a familiarity with the team, the players.
Hmm.
It's the NFL. I'm watching that anyway, just as a fan. So learning names and numbers much easier. Radio is different than TV. I always tell people it's a different prep. And we have a three
Hmm.
man booth and a sideline reporter. So for me, radio, I got to describe, I have to tell you what the formation is, what's going on, what happened. There's not
Yep.
as much time to story tell, especially in a three-man booth. Television, you can see what. So it's on me to
Hmm.
deliver context, the how, the why. So more prep goes into it. So in some ways, the actual art of calling the game is harder on radio. The prep is more intense on television. And then with college, again, you have duplicate numbers. Not every team is forthcoming with injuries,
Mm.
absences,
Yep.
suspensions. Hey, this guy wasn't warming up. Where is he? Yeah, we're not saying anything
Hmm.
about it. Okay, but he is your leading receiver. Violation of team rules, right? You get a
Yeah.
lot of stuff like that last minute and during the course of the week. So some coaches are more forthcoming than others. Some media relations departments are more forthcoming than others. But college is harder, and then it's two different teams essentially every week. So
Yep.
you're following the teams that you're preparing for, but you need context for your game. So you're also following the league at large. And again, in the NFL, there's 32 teams. In college football, I'm doing a game in the ACC. I need to know what's going on in the rest of the conference. I need to know what's
Yep.
going on amongst the top 25, the top 10, the top 15. What are the major stories? So, yeah, it's intense. And again, it's kind of a time of the year where there's always some sort of white noise on in the background, whether it's a college football podcast or radio show
Yeah.
or NFL radio show or NFL, Good Morning Football, whatever it might be. You're kind of always consuming that and then trying to stay current with all that's going on. And then you're trying to watch as many games as well. So, yeah, there's not a lot of time in the day from September through December.
And like I said, I keep thinking that I have it bad. You're just focusing in on the
It's
Panthers,
not bad.
listening.
Listen, I
Right.
tell people, I mean, at the end of the day, we get to call games for a living. So
It's awesome.
if you didn't like what you do, I wouldn't be in this. But it is a labor of love. It's fun going down these rabbit holes and finding
Yeah.
stories. And again, you're doing a Panthers game. My job is to connect our players, our coaches to the fans when I'm doing a college football game in a similar fashion. But you want to entertain, inform, and humanize, and you want to tell people who these players are under the helmet. You want to get into strategy, and you want to forecast and get into the X's and O's. And it's sort of this mishmash of catering to the diehard fans, the casual fans,
Hmm.
and then the people there because they want to find somebody to root for. So those things are fun when you're going through that process during a week.
That's awesome. I never really thought about from your perspective the radio versus TV and the difference and what that's like calling. But now as I sit here and think about when I listen on radio. I like to listen to radio a lot. And unfortunately I can't make it to, watch every Panthers game or I'm out and about. I'm like, I'm gonna turn on the Panthers radio here in Wilmington and get to hear you. And it's funny for me to listen to you and y'all call the game and like I react immediately based off of how you describe what's happened versus my wife and son who are like, wait, what? What's going on? They're like, why are you celebrating? Or why, like, what's your reaction? I'm like, oh, I can see it. I can tell what's happening by the way that they're describing it, which is really cool. So that's something that I've never really thought about.
Yeah, it's sometimes you'd be surprised, subtle things, right? So I'll give you one. In TV, when the ball is snapped, as play-by-play announcers, we view the snap as sacred.
Hmm.
Whatever you're saying, make sure, again, if it's a blowout game, different story, but first through third quarters, anything close, you want to get out of the way for the snap. You want to shut up. You want to lay out. That's the audience's cue. Something is about to happen. It's the silence.
Hmm.
It's kind of like the point in tennis or the serve in tennis or the pitch in baseball, right? On television, you kind of back out of the way when that's about to happen. On radio, it's the opposite because you can't see it. So you'll hear me say the snap or some version of that on pretty much every play on radio because, again, we're setting up the formation. As a listener, I always feel you're listening, you're taking it in. But when I say the snap, that's your cue. Okay, lock in, stay with me. The play
Something's
starts,
happening. Yep.
right? And sometimes when I'll listen and you'll hear guys, everything bleeds into one and they're setting up the formation, trips to the right, the tight end split out to the left, running back motions out into the slot. Now all of a sudden the quarterback's back to throw. So, whoa, what happened? The play started and you feel rushed as a listener. And so I said, if you can just give them that little shotgun snap or chest
Hmm.
high snap or knee high snap or ankle high snap or a helmet high snap, whatever it might be, now as a listener, you've kind of like, okay, the play has started. I didn't remember the previous 10 seconds, but now I got to lock in if I want to know what's
Yep.
going on.
That's awesome. It's just small details that make a big difference when you're listening in. So one of the other things that, just again curious from my perspective, some of the Panthers legends who we would
Yeah.
call here is, what's it like working with Jake, Luke, Jordan? I know there's probably others around the organization that you get to work with, but great guys from what we can tell from afar.
Oh my
But
gosh, it's a blast. So, it's funny. I'll start with Luke, who's kind of the newest at this. The single most brilliant football mind I have ever come across. His ability to pick up just nuanced things. Where again, we have a producer, David Langton, who's been doing this since day one for the Panthers, and he says every week when Luke's in the booth, I learn something else.
believe it.
He makes me a better broadcaster. He makes me a better football fan. Just the little details that he picks up on. And so I'm always very cognizant. Hey, pre-snap, you see something, you want to call it out, just motion to me, hand gesture to me.
Hmm.
I want you to call that out. And sometimes he'll notice a subtle movement with a safety or a linebacker, and to him, all of a sudden, he knows the coverage, he knows the play.
It's wild.
And it's just it's kind of like that scene from A Beautiful Mind, right, where he, or the
Yep.
Zach Galifianakis scene from The Hangover, where he's
All the
playing cards, and he's
numbers.
putting it all together. I mean, this guy's got a beautiful mind when it comes to football. Just gifted. And so
It's amazing.
be around him and have again that resource. It's incredible. This guy coaches Pee Wee football, and before the game, I said, "Hey, what's in your notebook? What are those plays for?" And he goes, "Oh, it's for my Pee Wee team." He's like, "This is what I got. Like the other team runs this, and he and Greg Olson have their own team." And so he'll
That's
be breaking down
crazy.
plays. And then Jake's got this great personality, right? He's the Cajun, but he speaks to offense so well. So when you have Jake and Luke in there, it's a great back and forth. And some of the best scenes happen before the game where we're just talking about the matchup and what do we see? What do we see as the inflection points, the pivot points in this game, the games within the game? And Luke will say, "Hey, I think you can do this and do that." And Jake says, "Yeah, no, okay, but if I'm the quarterback, I'm the offensive coordinator, I'm going to do this." And just to kind of be a fly on the wall, I'll just sort of watch them and we'll look around.
Yeah.
We're going back and forth, and Luke will say, "Well, okay, well then if you're doing this, I'll do this. Okay, well then if you're going to drop the safety, then I'm going to send him on a go route." Like it's next level
That's
stuff.
crazy.
And it's these two great minds going at it. And then Jordan is such a unique character. Like Jordan's the guy where he brings this humor, this levity to a broadcast. Obviously, he's played the game at a very high level. He knows the
Yeah.
game. He knows blocking. He knows the run game. He knows the pass blocking schemes. And, when you talk about a guy like Brian Burns, this was a guy who defended Julius Peppers in practice. So he can speak to, the technique you need and how to read a D end or a pass rusher. But his humor, his witticism, all those things, just kind of add some flavor to the broadcast. And then, I got to mention Jim Zoki, my guy in there, Zoke.
Yes.
Zoke's sort of, our de facto team historian. He's been around covering the team in some way, shape, or form since the very beginning. He has witnessed in some way every single Panthers game that has ever been played. He's a great resource for all of us. He provides context. He provides historical context, and he'll sneak in a handful of one-liners that get us to chuckle in every game as well.
That's awesome. Sorry, I thought I cut out for a second. No, that's great insight. Can you hear me?
Yep, I got you.
Oh, sorry, man. Oh, that's fantastic. I love to hear it, and I'm probably biased, but I think we have one of the best radio broadcasts
It's a
for
lot
any
of fun.
team.
I mean, we listen.
Yeah,
We just hope that the fun that we have comes through, and then
it does.
I know the success on the field hasn't been there the last few years, but when that happens, we do feel it's kind of our job to just entertain and uplift as we can.
Yeah, that actually brought up a good question that I was thinking coming into this. Like, what is it like going through some of those lulls in the season? I mean, we know how the past few years have been. Going out there, calling some of the games, or I guess one of the other things I was thinking about is this is what I was wondering. Is it hard not to get too emotional because as a fan, whatever happens or whatever we see, we're so invested and we're probably leaning way over in this direction that this is the wrong call or this is that. Like, is it hard to like just kind of stay in the middle as best as possible?
That's a great question. And it's funny. When I started, I really wanted that to be the goal.
Hmm.
Because again, having done so many of these national games for so long, um, fans may have their own opinions. I don't care who wins. For
Yeah.
me, give me a close game with drama, and that makes for a better broadcast, right? As long as I've been doing this, there's only been one instance where I have wanted a certain team to win, and that's a story in itself and a funny story. But it has nothing to do with gambling. It was just we ran into a coach from one team who could not have been a bigger a-hole. And
Ooh.
yeah, it was one of those situations where the
Yeah.
way this guy treated everybody, not to get too far down this rabbit hole, like God, I hope they get their brains bashed in
Yeah.
tomorrow.
You just wanted it.
You know,
Yeah.
but other than that, no. I mean, even when it's been my alma mater or somebody, if I'm watching from
Hmm.
home, sure, I want them to win. But when you're doing the game, you want a close game and you want a competitive game. And so this was sort of the background when I walked into this job. And again, living in Charlotte for as long as I had before taking the Panthers job, you become a fan of the team that's in your
Yep.
backyard. When I moved here, I lived a few blocks from where the Panthers play. They had just drafted Cam Newton. And so I would go to a few games, and you saw how electric Cam was. And you sort
Yes.
of said, yeah, this is fun. I want to go to more of these games. And you get involved and you get invested, even though that wasn't the team that you grew up with. You kind of become a fan. This is the city that we've made our home in. We're going to live here. And so very early on, I said, I feel okay. I need to have a little bit of detachment, right?
Yep.
And that went away after week one of game one, where
Yeah.
my wife can tell you, based on how I walk through the door when I get home, if the Panthers won or lost.
Wow.
And you feel it. And Jake
Yeah.
feels it. Luke feel it, obviously for different reasons. They played. Jordan feels it.
Yes.
But you feel it. And I kind of went back and I said, I think it's a good thing if our fans hear in my voice the excitement,
Hmm.
the disappointment, frustration, anxiety, joy,
Yes.
hope, promise. I think it's my job as a play-by-play guy for the home team to convey that, and so I don't shy away from that. I don't shy away from that. I think at times, probably last year, you sensed some of that
Hmm.
when we were on a roll, and at the end of 2022, you probably sensed the opposite end of that spectrum.
Yep.
But yeah, man, I wish I could sit here and say I can divorce the emotions from wins and losses. No,
It's hard.
I'm actively vested in their success. I want to see them successful. I want
Yep.
to see them win. I'm not just the play-by-play guy for the team. I'm a fan of the team, and I'm invested in. Again, my daughter, who's now 6 years old, grew up in Charlotte. She grew up a Panthers fan.
Yep.
That has been the only team that she's ever rooted for from before I even took this job, because that was the team in this area. And so she lives and dies it too. Hey,
Hmm.
Dad, the Panthers win. Hey, Dad, why didn't they win? All right, we won. How did Bryce Young do? How did,
Yeah.
so yeah, like
That's
we live it. We
awesome.
talk about it. It's a dinner table conversation.
That's awesome, man. I love to hear it. So I guess we'll get into a little more deeper Panthers talk now. A lot of things have happened this offseason, and you were there at the very beginning, at the introductory press conference for Dan Morgan, Dave Canales. Would love to hear, what you've heard or seen since their hires, or how you feel about them, kind of taking over in their both of their respective roles for the team.
I think there's a clear vision here where to build an infrastructure that is geared towards success over a long period of time, there is this realization there's no shortcuts to get there. And so if you look at just how they're building this thing, right? Um, and it started before Dan took over too, the investment in the offensive line, um,
Hmm.
continuity on defense. Ejiro is a future head coach. Make no mistake
Yep.
about that. He's a great defensive mind. And I know we've lost some pieces on that side of the ball, but you hope continuity can help to alleviate losses of a guy like Burns and Luvu and Chin and others. So they want to build this thing right. You feel like you have a franchise quarterback. And again, working with that piece, assuming Bryce Young is that guy, now you're creating the infrastructure around him. So, they're not looking to take any shortcuts. They want to get to a point where, hey, relatively soon we can start to contend for division titles and hopefully more. And then you want to put yourself in a window where if you can go 10 years where at worst you're competing for a playoff spot, and then in your best years, we're talking conference championships and more. To me, that's how you really build up your fan base as well.
Yep.
You're old enough to remember when the Panthers were an expansion team, right?
Yep.
Nobody's grandfather was born a Panthers fan.
Right.
And so you look at a team like the Patriots. I remember the Patriots growing up in New Jersey when they'd get beaten by the lowly Jets twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
The Patriots, before Bill Parcells, were a nothing franchise. And then Parcells takes them to a Super Bowl. Then we saw what happens with Belichick and Brady. And, over the course of 2 decades, they turn into a blue blood. The 49ers before the 80s were a nothing franchise. Bill Walsh, Joe Montana, over the course of that decade, turned the Niners into a blue blood. Same with the Steelers in the 70s. So if you think of what that decade can do for the Panthers, right? A decade of continued success. This is a franchise that hasn't had a winning season 3 years in a row. Even when they made the playoffs 3 years in a row, 1 year, they were under 500. So
that's right.
I think that can go a long way, like that decade of sustained success. And to me, that's what I see. Hey, this is a vision where we want to have good teams every year, but we want to get this thing to a point now where we can sustain this thing for a decade. And, obviously if Bryce Young is the guy, that's the big piece. If you have that guy, that allows you to do that. You look at the Steelers, obviously the great defense, but, Bradshaw still was a Hall of Fame quarterback, even though I think we look at the numbers differently now, different era. They had Franco Harris, Montana with Bill Walsh, Brady and Belichick, obviously. So you look at what the Packers have done. I know they've only won, a couple of Super Bowls, but basically since they got Brett Favre, and even now with Jordan Love, who seems to be that successor from Favre to Rodgers, they've been in some sort of contention window for the better part of 3 decades now.
Yes.
Like that goes a long way. I think that goes a long way when you're trying to elevate your brand and again build up your fan base. This is a transplant city. You have success, you'll get converts.
You will. You absolutely will. I agree. I'm really pleased. I feel like just from afar, what we've seen and the pressers, how we've seen him navigate, or both of them navigate the offseason program. I'm excited. It feels genuine that he is bringing kind of a different culture here, maybe getting back to the roots of keep pounding. Not that hasn't been here, but I'm excited for it. And we talked a little bit, briefly there about some of the roster acquisitions, shoring up the offensive line, getting a Deontay Johnson, some of the draft capital, whether it's Xavier, Brooks, Jatavian Sanders. We look at the defense and Ejero getting some of the pieces that he's worked with before. When you look at the entire offseason, who's been brought in, who was drafted, are there any particular players that you're really excited to see this fall?
Well, I think you got to start up front, right? The signing of Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt to shore up the interior of the offensive line. The Panthers started 15 guards last season, which, again, anybody would tell you that's not fair to a rookie quarterback. That's not fair to any quarterback. And then Bryce Young had to deal with the change of play caller. So just starting there, what should be a much improved offensive line, better depth up front, and then consistency from a play calling standpoint. I do think that will help Bryce Young. Then you've added weapons. The running back room is much deeper than it was a year ago, right? It's Chuba Hubbard going into a contract year. Miles Sanders needing to prove himself, looking for a bounce back. This is a guy, again, he's only 2 years removed from a 1,200-yard season for a team that went to the Super Bowl. Jonathan Brooks, who when I watched him in college before he tore the ACL, was the best running back in the country, hands down. Hands down. This guy is dynamic. He's good in space, it's size, speed, power, strength, all those things. I don't want to jump to this conclusion and put this on him, but look at Jahmyr Gibbs last year with the Lions, right? Coming off an injury, they kind of brought him along slow. And then the second half of the season, they let him go. And he was a big reason that, Detroit went as far as it did in the postseason. So, can you get that from a guy like Jonathan Brooks? Raheem Blackshear, useful piece on special teams, the return game, a guy that can catch the ball, make plays in space. The tight end room is deeper with Sanders. I'm still a big believer in Tommy Tremble. I still think that there's untapped potential in Tommy Tremble. Ian Thomas, we know what he can do as a blocking tight end. And then obviously, the receiving room had to be upgraded, but think of it this way, right? Terrace Marshall went into last year as your number 2 receiver. He goes into this year, at least he goes into training camp, probably as your number 5 receiver. So that room has been upgraded. You've got Leggett, you've got Deontay Johnson. They brought in a handful of these USFL guys, and you never know if you cash in on one of them. Adam Thielen, I know, is 34, but showed he can still be productive. I'm not ready to write off Jonathan Mingo after one season. This was a guy who had A.J. Brown comps coming out of Ole Miss. Can another season, with the Panthers in the pros unlock Jonathan Mingo? If that's the case, again, that's a second-round pick. That's a pretty good pedigree from a program that's produced high-end NFL wide receivers. So I'm hopeful Jonathan Mingo can take that next step forward. So, this offense is better equipped. And then, defensively, I do think there's questions, right? J.C. Horn, if he stays healthy, it's a game changer. It is a game changer. He is an absolute top 5 corner when he's healthy. I thought Xavier Woods as a communicator on the back end does a nice job. We'll find out if, Gilmore is still an option at one of the other cornerback positions or as a depth piece, but they seem to really like, Dane Jackson. They've got Fuller and Scott, so you've got more depth at safety. Josie Jewell, the return of Shaq Thompson at linebacker. How healthy will Clowney be? Same goes for Wanham. We know you need those 2 guys to be pass rushers. Can Amari Barno be a depth piece? But I would expect, the Panthers to probably go a little heavy on defense in the next draft, especially at the pass rushing position. But to me, this is an improved team, and offensively they should be a lot better. And at the end of the day, I think me, and the casualist of Panther fans knows this. The guy who's got the key at the end of this is Bryce. If Bryce is the guy that this team thinks he can be, and if he's the guy that you moved all in to go get, and if you still think he is that guy, he can fast track all of this.
Yep, I agree. I mean, it's exciting. Like it's hard to imagine coming off a 2-15 that we'd be in a position to feel excited about this year, but it's there.
That's the beauty of sports, man. That is the beauty of sports. And I said it last year. I said, even when things were bad, looking forward, you got to find roses in the rubble. You got to find a few of these roses in the rubble, and you've got to use that as your garden base. And hopefully we found a few of those in the draft at the end of last season. And again, the biggest rose in that bush is Bryce.
Yep, absolutely. So I'm curious, moving into a little bit of talk about training camp. A lot of things happening this year. One, moved back to Charlotte, which makes a lot of sense. The renovations to the practice facility, that's not going to be done, but we are going to have fans, which is nice. We've got the event still keeping South Carolina involved at Clemson University. I just know from last year, so I went to Back Together, which was at Wofford, and you did a fantastic job kind of leading that. FanFest had some things as well. Is there any particular event that you're looking forward to, or, what are your thoughts going into training camp this year?
Well, there's 2. The first Saturday, the 27th, Back Together Saturday is always fun. Hopefully we get a nice crowd for that. And this new staff and some of the new guys that we signed, we give our fans an opportunity to hear them and get a sense of where this team is at that juncture at the start of training camp. And then just from a nostalgia standpoint, going back to Clemson, we're celebrating 30 years of Carolina Panther football. This is the 30th season of Carolina Panther football. And to go back to where it started in 1995, Death Valley and Clemson, which, just again, as a college football fan, that's probably one of my favorite places to call a game. And I've had so much fun doing Clemson games over the years. Given both of my worlds are colliding and then the history of the franchise, I just think that'll be a neat moment for our fans. And, it gives us opportunities again to go back into the vault, relive some of that nostalgia and, look back on some of those fond memories.
That's awesome. Well, I'm excited. I don't think we'll make back together, but we're trying to get down there in early August, make a few days, which will be nice. I'm excited. So it should be fun. I know I've kept you quite a bit, and I appreciate you coming on here, kind of closing us out. And we kind of talked a little bit about it, but wanted to get your general thoughts on outlook for the season. You don't have to throw out record predictions or anything like that, but maybe what you're looking forward to coming into, the first season with Dave Canales.
Really, again, it comes down to Bryce Young. Dave Canales has worked wonders with Russell Wilson, with Geno Smith, and with Baker Mayfield. And if he can unlock a guy who was taken number one in the draft, it really sets up this franchise for long-term success. And whether some of that success is realized in 2024, a small percentage, a big percentage, whatever that might be, I don't want to say it's irrelevant because you want to win every year. And in the NFL, it's easy to have a quick turnaround. We saw with the Jaguars just 2 years ago, right? That first year for Trevor Lawrence was a total disaster. That Urban Meyer experiment did not go well. Well, they brought in Doug Peterson. They brought in a new coaching staff. And all of a sudden, second year, not only are they in the playoffs, they won a playoff game. Would I love to see that? Obviously, I'd sign up for that in a heartbeat. But if we can get to the end of the season, we can get to week 18. And, Bryce Young, after his second season, if to a man, to a woman, to every fan, to every person who follows the Carolina Panthers, we can say we have got our guy. We have got our guy at quarterback, and that spot we don't have to worry about for the next decade. Now you can start to address all the other places that you want to and start building a championship contender. I remember in 2011 when I first moved to Charlotte, and we watched Cam Newton those first couple of weeks. And now Cam told us right away. He was in a little bit of a better situation, but again, not a great situation. They were coming off a real tough season the year before where they go 2-14. But we knew right away, and all of a sudden you said it. Yep, okay. The record in 2011 was irrelevant, but you knew you had your guy for essentially the next decade. And, Cam, we saw what he was able to do, MVP, Super Bowl, multiple playoff appearances, and, a guy who made the Panthers must-see TV for not just Carolina fans, but fans across the NFL.
Really did. That's a great outlook, and I fully agree with you. And me personally, I know Bryce Young is a quiet guy, not, super vocal like a Cam. And I know he's never going to probably come out here and get riled up about what people are saying elsewhere. But for his own sake, I just hope he goes out there this year and proves a lot of people wrong. And like you said,
I'll share this story with you. So this was from a college football colleague of mine who had covered Alabama quite a bit in Bryce Young's final season. And we were talking the other day, and he says they were in a meeting with Bill O'Brien, who was Bryce's offensive coordinator. And Bill's history with quarterbacks. He had Tom Brady in New England. And during their production meeting, they asked Bill, they said, hey, where does Bryce Young rank in terms of the processing, the preparation? And Bill says, not even close, best I've ever seen. And kind of looked around. I said, okay, like best, because you had a guy who is considered the greatest to ever play the position, Tom Brady. Yep. And he says he would do things that Tom Brady wouldn't do. And so it got into, well, like what? So they would come into their meetings, first day after they played, and the coaches would have the reports prepared. And if they weren't buttoned up, Bryce would call them on their blind spots. Okay,
Wow.
well, I have this. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We didn't see that. Well, when I was watching film and I went back, we could have done this, and we had this, and we had this, and he said it was such a high level of intellect, the processing, the preparation, the film study. He said he's never seen it at any level from a player, and he said he put so much pressure on our coaches to be great because they had to meet him at that level. He
Wow.
prepared like a coach, and I just think he got scrambled last year, being a
Yep.
rookie, having no offensive line. We struggled at the receiver position, and then, not having the consistency where Frank Reich's calling the plays, then it's Thomas Brown, then it's back to Reich, and then
Mhm.
it's Thomas Brown again. And you have to remember, Thomas Brown and Frank Reich had never worked together. These weren't
It's true.
even the same philosophical trees. So you
Mhm.
had differing and at times competing philosophies. And that's hard on a rookie quarterback. So I think one voice with Dave Canales calling the plays, having a system now, having offensive alignment philosophically on that staff is going to be big. But this position, man, is so much of it is from the shoulders and above. And I really think, with just philosophical alignment and a better supporting cast, um, we're about to see. I'm bullish on Bryce. I really am. I think
Love
we're
it.
about to see a guy who um, can really take that next step. And if he takes that next step, we take that next step as a franchise.
Love it, man. Well, this has been fantastic. I know your schedule is swamped, so I really appreciate you coming on here. I will plug your X and I'll let you, which is Twitter, plug in anything else you want to, but you can follow Anish at Shroff PXP on X. Be sure to go out there. Lots of fantastic content. I know you're doing a ton of work, again, with the podcast for the Panthers, everything else that's going on. Anything else that you wanted to plug right now for yourself or just
You
getting
know,
ready for?
I'll say this, and this is for Panther fans. We put a lot of work into this last year. We put together a podcast called Cardiac. It's a serialized, scripted podcast that looks back at the championship run in 2003, the run to the Super Bowl. I know we know how it ends, but it was so much fun to take folks through the journey. We talked to over 25 former players, coaches, people who covered the team, broadcasters, and Matt Hogan, myself, David Langton, put a lot of time and effort into this, and we released it episodically throughout the season last year. And every episode is anchored by a story. So it's not just a play-by-play of the season. There's the story of Hope Stout. There's the story of X-Clown, which I think people will get a kick out of. We take you behind the scenes for the Keep Pounding speech.
So big.
Jake Delhome's journey, how that team started and built itself from the ashes of 1-15. And
Mhm.
so there are some parallels. Well, anyway, the entire 3 hour serial, whatever you want to call it, the entire 3 hour series is now on one episode. So you've got a ride in the summer, you got a beach trip. If you're making the trip from Wilmington to Clemson, you need something to listen to in the car. We would be beyond the moon if you, as they say, how does it say? Like and subscribe, right?
Yeah, right.
Like, rate, and
That's it.
subscribe. We didn't get a ton of plug. It wasn't something that was, shared a whole lot, but the fans who have listened to it, the feedback has been great. And if you can encourage your fans to give it a listen
Well,
and share their thoughts, good, bad, otherwise, we would love it. But we just think it'd be a great nostalgic ride for Panther fans who remember 2003. And then also, for those younger fans, you get a chance to kind of really go back into that first season where, the Carolina Panthers truly arrived.
it's amazing. I fully back that. Fantastic podcast series, like you said, just going through the history, the stories. I'll be sure to put that in this episode for folks that maybe haven't seen it or heard of it, so you can go out and listen to that. It is worth a listen. So it's, hey man, this has been great. Truly appreciate you coming on the show, and we'll definitely hear you this fall on Panthers radio, and I'm sure we're going to see you on TV. So thanks for stopping by, Anish.
Appreciate it. Thank you.